Hello, this is Ken Ferry with this week's Boots in the Field report. This week I'd like to talk about the plan for tar spot in 2022. Our virtual first winter agronomy meeting stirred up several questions, most centered around fungicide application, when to spray, how many times to spray. We had live viewers for the event from central Minnesota to southern Indiana, and the answer is going to be different depending on your location. Matt showed some strong responses to spraying 2 times. The tough thing to understand is we're spraying twice just to maintain yield, not to increase it. Matt also showed plots where one fungicide application didn't pay for itself. So I can see why we have questions. It's often said in real estate, it's location, location, location. Tar spot is like real estate. Location is a big factor on when you should spray and how many times. We've studied tar spot for the past 9 years and concluded it was a late August, early September disease. In this case, if we were not at threshold for other diseases, we recommend dragging your feet till R3 to make your fungicide application, trying to protect as much late fill as possible. I know this goes against most fungicide salesmen's promotions, but it's our plot data that's telling us that this is the best time for one application. Matt showed university studies that showed the same thing when it comes to tar spot. VT applications don't last long enough to protect the back end of grain fill when it comes to tar spot. Our recommendation is to shoot for R3 if you don't reach threshold of other diseases before then. 2021 has taught us a few things that have us rethinking our approach to tar spot. As we see wide swings in fungicide trials from not paying their way to large payouts for not only one application but for 2 applications. Here in McLean County, I think we could have got a reasonable response just opening a jug of fungicide and setting it in the corner of the field. Fungicide responses were huge. What 2021 taught us was that tar spot is not just a late August, early September disease. Now, it has consistently showed up then, because that is when the environmental conditions were most conducive. Tar spot is a cool season disease. It likes temperatures in that 60 to 73 degree range. It likes humidity above 75%. And most important, we need 7 hours of leaf wetness. While we get cooler temperatures earlier in the season, we usually don't see humidities above 75%, and we don't see 7 hours of wetness until the rows close. When the rows do close in late June, early July, we're most likely to see warmer temperatures. As we cool back down in late August and September, we tend to come back into the sweet spot for tar spot. 2021 threw us a curveball here in central Illinois. The end of June and most of July was below average in temperatures, above average in humidity. It rained a lot. As we said in the meeting, McLean County received 2 500-year rains in 19 days apart. I saw the first tar spot at Corn College campus on June 30th, almost 2 months earlier than what we had been seeing. As I talked about it in last summer's podcast, tar spot is here early, and we're not sure what that's going to lead to. Growers called in and said, I'm not seeing it. My response was to look down. We have trained you guys to start scouting at one leaf below the ear and up. The top 4 leaves are the real estate that we need to keep clean for good grain fill. The other reason growers weren't seeing it was because it wasn't present in the field. We have watched tar spot spread from Streeter area where we first found it back in 2013, spread about 35 miles a year in all directions, kind of like a mushroom cloud. It reached Hayworth 3 years ago. It was in every cornfield here locally 2 years ago, and it did become a real problem for us here in 2021. At the same time, tar spot has been in the Streeter area for years, but it didn't show up until August, and its effect on yield was much less than we saw here at Hayworth. The reason tar spot didn't blow up early in Streeter was because it was one of our drier areas in June and July. Growers to the south in that Arthur Sullivan area couldn't find tar spot when they were scouting. The reason for this, it hadn't got there yet. It did get there by late September, but it had very little effect or dinged the yields a small amount at that point. What we learned in 2021 is that tar spot shows up in June and July. We need to change our approach. While waiting to R3 still showed to be the best timing for a one-time application, a lot of damage was already done and the disease was building at such a fast pace we couldn't stop it. On top of that, everyone was spraying due to commodity prices, and it overwhelmed our aerial applicators. Some growers waited 3 weeks to get sprayed after they placed the order. The concept of scouting and keeping your powder dry to pull the trigger at the right time only works if the applicator can deliver on time. What we also learned in 2021 is this disease is not one to take lightly. We originally thought if this disease continues to show up late, most years, we're going to be able to outrun it. Remember when soybean rust first made the United States? We all went to meetings trying to figure out how we're going to manage this devastating disease. As it turned out, soybean rust spores make it up here almost every year, but they're too late to cause any yield loss. We hoped tar spot would fall in this category, but we were wrong. Yield loss as high as 50 bushel. Tar spot was the cause of much of our down corn and led to high amounts of harvest loss on top of the 50 bushel we lost in grain fill. Talking with Bill and Missy at B&M Consulting in Coldwater, Michigan, they saw 100 bushel yield losses under their irrigation, where getting 7 hours of leaf wetness would be the norm. As we put our plan of attack together for next year, the first thing we must answer is tar spot in our area. Now, I toured a lot of fields in Iowa this summer, and I couldn't find it. Many of those areas did see it by September. When the snow melts, go look at your corn residue. If you haven't plowed it under already, that is, and if you have tar spot, the black lesions will still be visible on those leaves. If you can't find any, double spraying is probably not going to pay. If you had record yields, but notice tar spot made it to your area for the first time, you probably have 1 year of grace on your rotated acres that were beans this year. Your corn on corn will be your highest risk. For everyone else who knows that they have tar spot spores in their field, we need to have a plan and we need to follow our plan. What's the chance we'll get a repeat of the same weather conditions in 2022 that we had in 2021? Probably not good, meaning in 2022 the odds are we won't see tar spot till late August, early September. But we now know we have the pathogens, we're growing the host. All that is left for the disease pyramid is conditions. The Tar Spotter app that Matt talked about will be a great tool to use to know when conditions are right for the disease to fire up. That entwined with weekly scouting. I know, when some of you hear me say the word scouting, you shut the podcast off. But this is where the pest boss comes into play. Someone designated to watch the farm against all threats, and believe me, tar spot is a threat. If tar spot shows up early, at or prior to tasseling, 2 applications will be needed. A V15 to a VT application and a second application at that R3, R4 window. If tar spot shows up after tasseling, from V2 to R2, we're going to go ahead and make that first application with the plan to make the second one at R3 and R4. Here we can use the Tar Spotter app and scouting to make sure the second pass is needed. If no tar spot is visible at R3, we can go ahead and make our normal application. Pay attention to the Tar Spotter app and scouting to be sure a second one isn't needed. Now, don't make the mistake and take your eye off the ball concerning all the other common diseases and insects you should be scouting for. Don't get so wrapped up in timing your tar spot applications and miss the silk clipping insects. Boys, we got to get this crop pollinated. The June-July conditions here in central Illinois that caused our tar spot disaster in what we call Tar Spot Alley was a shot across the bow. The chances of us having these conditions again is probably low, but it did teach us a lot about this disease and the kind of damage it can do when it fires up early. My concern is for all the farmers in Wisconsin, northern Iowa, Michigan, Minnesota, as well as our friends in Canada. For you guys to have cool conditions, moist conditions at the end of June would be considered a normal weather pattern. After what I saw here in 2021, I'm afraid this is going to be a monster for you guys when it gets there. And I did say when. No doubt in my mind this disease will continue to spread across all areas of corn production. In the end, the answer to solving tar spot will be with genetics. But this is probably 5 to 7 years out. Until then, we're going to have to manage this monster with fungicides. I know the thought of spraying corn twice to maintain yield and standability sucks. But it sucks less with corn bumping around between $5 and $6. Keep sending your yield map data in. Even if you don't plan on sitting down for a yield map meeting, our GIS crew uses them to better identify your management zones. Don't forget to turn in your soil testing orders too so the crews can have them ready to go. To stay up to date, check out our website at croptechinc.com and subscribe to our podcast, Boots in the Field Report. Keep her safe, keep her moving.